Hey folks, this is the fighting nerd Ray Chalinsky and his co-host Jolly Roger coming to you from the Resistance Bunker. Been doing a lot of videos about the state of sci-fi and how the social justice warriors and people who just really don't seem to understand what sci-fi is have been ruining it. And this is along those same lines. But the thing is this. I think that from a business standpoint, the Kathleen Kennedys of the world, and the people that are doing the DC movies and a lot of the other sci-fi movies aren't getting sci-fi fandom, especially with this latest thing where solo tanking and the Last Jedi not doing well in a lot of the fans' eyes. They're blaming the fans and basically calling them stupid and uh, misogynist and homophobic and blaming the fans for the fact that they made a couple of really bad movies. What they don't, first of all, for the most part, science fiction fans, that includes Star Wars fans, are a pretty liberal bunch. I am an exception in sci-fi in that I tend towards conservative. I'm kind of a right-leaning libertarian when it comes to politics. But by and large, the sci-fi people are going to be the most tolerant and the most leftist people that you're going to meet. And to demonstrate that, look at the people that made the original Star Trek series, the cultural phenomenon that it is. The whole first interracial kiss between Kirk and O'Hara probably actually wasn't, if you really look into it, but it was the most well known. The constant uh, themes of inclusion and tolerance that was Star Trek. Star Wars was a little different animal when it first came out, but it wasn't. It certainly wasn't racist or homophobic or anything like that. It didn't deal with any of those things. It wasn't that kind of a story. It was essentially a swashbuckling pirate story in space. But the notion that because fans didn't like Last Jedi and didn't go see Solo, is that because they're ignorant, homophobic, racist, misogynists, it is indicative of why those movies didn't do so well. But it's not the reason. What this shows is that the people who made those movies don't understand their audience. People go to movies at their basis to be entertained. For sci-fi movies, they go there to be entertained, and they do go there to be intellectually stimulated for the most part, but not to be propagandized and not to be preached to. It is fine to have a character that is homosexual. Most sci-fi fans would even encourage that. But that can't be what defines the character. You have a character that has something to do with the story that happens to be a homosexual, that happens to be female, that happens to be black. Where they miss the point is when they have a character that is there for the purpose of having a homosexual, black, female, whatever kind of character there. And that's the only reason for that character's existing. Because it's not really a character, it's a token, it's a space filler. And you're going to lose audiences and if you do that, no matter what political stripe they are. But the reaction of these crybabies that are responsible for these science fiction failures is to attack the fans for not being enlightened enough. And if they keep that up, then the movies will continue to fail. Now, let's look at the Marvel universe, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because it is so widely successful. Why? Because they do cater to the fans. But that's a pretty diverse bunch. Black Panther, Falcon. I don't believe there are any openly homosexual characters in there. But that's not because that these people have anything against homosexuals. Is it doesn't have anything to do with the story. Right? The Black Panther is a king of Wakanda. They chose a black man for that role because a black man made sense for that role. The Falcon is black. But the Falcon could have been Chinese. The Falcon could have been Filipino. It could have been an Arab because it was not the race was not the defining point of that character. So the thing of it is when people cry that Solo tanked, The Last Jedi tanked, or whatever these movies tank, where they're heaping on this virtue signaling, the issues that they tank because their fan base is stupid or prejudiced in some way is laughable. It's ludicrous. By and large, science fiction fans lean to a great extent to the left, and even those that don't are very tolerant. It's only recently that it's been cool to be a science fiction fan, that it's been cool to be a nerd, even a fighting nerd. I call it pre-Big Bang Theory nerddom. Because hardcore Star Trek fans, hardcore Star Trek fans, Star Wars fans, hardcore sci-fi fans, or fantasy fans, nerds, geeks, dweebs, there's all kinds of derogatory words for us. We have been a minority. Because it hasn't been cool to be nerds for most of the time. That's a new phenomenon, being cool as a nerd. For the most time, nerds were the ones that were getting ridiculed and picked on and whatnot. And we had Star Trek conventions, we had sci-fi Star Wars conventions, we had comic book conventions where we could go there and be nerds and not be picked on. We could have created these little enclaves for 2 or 3 days at a time where there was a large enough concentration of us where we were the minority in that area. So the idea that, because of that, nerds have been, and science fiction fans have been tolerant because we've been tolerant of each other. If you had a guy that was really into comic books, and you go to these conventions, you didn't see a black man. If you met in an elevator or you sat beside one, or you didn't see a Chinese, you didn't see a woman, you didn't see a gay person. You saw a science fiction fan, you saw a comic book fan, you saw an ardent Star Wars fan. So I really think it's idiotic, disingenuous, and really petty to paint science fiction fans now because they didn't like a few of the movies that the virtue signaling leftists in Hollywood have turned out, and then they're pointing them and use the racist card, or the homophobe card, or the misogyny card, injecting identity politics in it, why they failed, to explain why they failed, is laughable in one way, but it's kind of dangerous. It's dangerous to the companies and to the stockholders in the companies that they work for, because their movies will continue to fail, because it shows a drastic misunderstanding of their audience. Or it's just an excuse for their incompetence. So that is. They got to understand the audience. And the problem is that they have been putting out bad movies and trying to compensate for their lack of quality by pandering to a completely misunderstood audience. They're not pandering to to the audience that is actually interested in those films. They're pandering to the other radical leftists. They're pandering to identity politics. And maybe they think that they're going to get a whole new audience of hardcore left social justice warrior types that's going to make up for the fan base that they're losing. Not going to happen, folks. But what I really think is they just don't understand. They think that because it's Star Wars, or they thought because it's Star Wars or it's Star Trek or it's Superman or whatever, the people are just going to come see it because of the name recognition. They're trying to build off these franchises that have been built up by people who did understand the fans. And it's not working. And it's not going to work. Just won't. So try to really understand the genre and the fans of that genre, and stop trying to force them to think a certain way. And you might start making movies that make money again. So there it is. That's my rant for the week. Remember, folks, that words make history. This is the Fighting Nerd, Ray Chlensky, and his co-host Jolly Roger, coming to you from the Resistance Bunker and bidding you goodbye from the Resistance Bunker.